Hello friends, welcome back to the shop and welcome to a new shop video on the making of a tamper. So we're going to be making a tamper today using this shell casing, and this was given to me by my friend the Durham Duke. He had acquired a couple of these casings. This is a 50 caliber automatic express or 50 AE shell casing, and it's really just a perfect size for a tamper. And he asked me if I would make a tamper for him if he sent me the shell. I said sure, and I did so, and he was kind enough to send a second one for me to make a tamper for myself. And I made his already and sent it to him a couple months ago, actually. I've just been too busy with other things to put together a video on, or to even make the tamper for myself. But I had some time while I was on vacation, and I thought, why not do this and do it as a quick little video. So we're going to be using this pen blank is cocobolo, and that's what I made his out of. Actually, I will insert a picture here so that you can see the tamper that I made. This is the basic shape that I'll be using, and yeah, you can see the basic design. So we'll be using this cocobolo blank, and we'll be using the 50 caliber casing, and I've already laid out basically how we're going to do this on a card, and I do it this way. I measure out all the sharp lines are very carefully measured. So this is 4 inches. This is a ½ inch from this point to this point, and that's the inner diameter of this casing. This is the depth. From this point to this point is 1 inch, and that's the depth that the casing will fit on. So this is all to a 1-to-1 scale, and I can use calipers then to just transfer these measurements directly onto the lathe. And this is the basic shape that we're going to be following. Now, I'm not an expert wood turner, so I don't try to exactly match the drawing. It's just a way for me to kind of plan out what I'm going to be doing, and we'll see how it evolves. So, first step, the first thing I want to do is actually put a little bit of lead into the bottom of this, just to give it some added weight. Now, we're not trying to, add a ridiculous amount of weight, just a little bit heavier at the tip, just to make it feel good in the hand, just to sort of tip the balance forward. And to do that, I'm going to use some lead wire, and I'm just going to make a coil of lead wire by beginning with just gripping the ends in needle nose pliers and starting to form a spiral. Try to keep that as tight as possible. Once you get it turned around once, you can just kind of go in and do this by hand. And I'll tighten that up a little bit. Sorry if that wandered out of shot. So we're going to make this as tight as we can. This lead wire is wire that I use in fly tying to weight flies. You could also use lead shot or split shot if you're a fly fisherman that uses split shot, or a fisherman that uses split shot. Really any form of lead, and it's easy enough to melt lead down, and you could pour it in, but it's just as easy to do this and then epoxy it down into the bottom. Alright, that looks to be just about the right size there. So we're going to clip that off, and of course I don't have clippers with me. The nice thing about lead is that you can just use a razor blade, and we'll do that at a bit of an angle. Hopefully you can see that. There we go. So that will hopefully fit. I'll have to trim a little bit more off, but you get the idea. I'll trim this as I talk. So what we will do is we'll put this down into the bottom, and we will epoxy it in place. I'll actually put a layer of epoxy in, drop this on top of it, and then add some more epoxy. And I've already accounted for that measurement as I was designing this depth. But the truth is, with turning, at least the way I turn, it's not a very exact process, and I'm going to be sizing it on the lathe anyway, so we may have to sort of cut back on that. There we go. That's going in nicely. And we'll have to get it to sink all the way to the bottom, but that's okay. We'll just ram it down in there with a pencil or something. So that'll add just enough weight that this is going to want to tip forward and, you know, help you with the tamping, but not make it too heavy. Okay. So the next thing to do then is going to be to get this in a lathe. We'll actually chuck it because I'm going to want to have access to the one end. We'll mark off where we're going to be, well, we'll round it first, and then we'll mark off where we're going to be having our major divisions. We'll turn this end down to the appropriate size until this fits, and then once this fits, we'll begin to do work back here, trying to get it to just a little bit larger than the shell casing at first, and then we can sort of taper it up as shown here, and we'll put a little bit of a bulbous top on it, round off the end. Once we get that mostly done, we will, you know, the casing will not be permanently attached. We'll take it out, we'll be able to turn this around in the lathe, clamp on the tenon that we formed that'll go into the casing, and finish off the end. So that's going to be the basic steps. I am going to try to take you over to the lathe and show you as much of that as I can.
Okay, so
we'll see how it goes.
Put this between centers and turn it that way, just to get it round, and then we'll move over to the chuck. Hopefully you'll be able to see this. This is the first time I'm trying to film on the lathe. So we're going to just round it over using a roughing gouge. This kind of drive center, you have to sometimes tighten it up. Obviously not going to use this whole thing because I'm going to need about 4 inches, so I'm going to move down a little bit just to get better leverage here, and drop that down a little bit. Doesn't have to be perfect. Pretty good. Alright, so that's that. We've now rounded that over. And what I'm going to do next is transfer that into a chuck. We'll replace that drive center with a chuck. So I'll bring you back in just a minute when that's done. Okay, so we are now in the chuck. I just want to make sure you can still see everything there. Looks like you can. So what I'm going to do first is I'm just going to go ahead and rough this off to bring it down to the same round dimension, and that'll just make life a bit easier, allow me to get the tool rest in where I want it to be. So we'll do that first. Good enough for where we're going. Maybe you can see there's still a bit of a flat right here, but that's okay. We will do that all better. So the next thing I want to do is actually measure off. I had measured, and then I went and got rid of the measurement because I decided to round everything up. So I want this to be approximately a 4-inch piece. So I'm going to go ahead and I've got opportunity to adjust that later. So I'm just going to go ahead and put a mark there. Bring that in as close as I can. And transfer that mark around. Okay, so that's I'm gonna actually part that off at that point. So let's go ahead and get rid of the excess and bring this down to something close to its final size. actually cut at this point, so I'm going to stop that, pull this back, and hopefully this will just come off. There we go. Good enough. Now, since we're chipped in there, we should be able to clean that up without too much trouble. Did it there, because we're going to come back in with our center. Make sure that's good and tight. And now we're going to start using our measurements here to mark off where this sort of tenon is going to be at the end here. I'm going to mark that at about that 1 inch point we had previously. And I can spin that on. And I've got calipers that I will set to that 1/2 inch measurement, and hopefully you can see what I'm doing here. There we go. Close enough for what we're trying to do. Okay, so now the goal, let's see what kind of angle we got here. Yeah, you should be able to see that. Now what we're going to do is we're going to come right in with the parting tool at that line and bring the diameter down to what the calipers tell us we need. We don't want a super tight fit because we want to leave room for the epoxy. Switch over to the scraper and move up the post a bit. Alright, so now what we're going to do is we're going to wait for that epoxy to cure, and then once that's done we'll be able to start sizing this to fit over the cartridge. So I'll bring you back when we get to that stage. Okay folks, so we've got our our casing here with the epoxy inside. You won't be able to see it, but that weight is now secure. And we're going to start using this to size onto the tenon that we're forming. And we know we're a little bit large at the end here. Just wanted to sort of get a sense of that. We want to fit it as best we can to the actual piece so that it's a close match, but not a perfect fit, because we do need room for the epoxy. Wait a second. Gotta put on my face shield. That's bottoming out. So we're going to have to. We knew that we were going to have some play in the bottom, and we have to adjust for that. So let's see. It's about 3/8. So we'll just go ahead and trim 3/8 off the end. That initial measurement I made may have been a little oversized. There we go. That's getting right up there, right up against this this wall here, which is what we wanted. So that's perfect. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put some grooves in this, just to allow the epoxy to have something to grip to. And I will do that with the parting tool. There we go. So that should be perfect. Fits on nicely, but it's loose enough that I know the epoxy is going to get all around there. So what I'm going to do now, and I'll do this off camera, is I'm going to go ahead and rough the inside of this up with some 80 grit sandpaper, again just to give the epoxy something to grab to. And then I'll put some epoxy on here, bring this on, use the tailstock to clamp it in place, and I'll bring you back when we're ready to continue turning. Okay folks, so what we've done here is we've got a flat end here in the live center that we use just to push up against this and basically clamp it while the epoxy was curing. So that is now permanently affixed. The truth is I made a bit of a mistake here. I really should have turned this around and turned the other side of it before I glued this on, because I wanted to be able to clamp this in the chuck, and now I'm going to have to tape this up, and I may have difficulty centering it, but we'll get by. So the next, this was just put here because I don't want to get epoxy on the ways of the lathe. Okay, so the next step is going to be to begin turning this down, just to get things flush with the cartridge. And in case you haven't noticed, I am certainly not a wood turner. I do this occasionally for fun. I'm not really a great wood turner, so don't think that what you're watching in any way represents a lesson in turning. There's lots of good wood turners on YouTube you can go to for that. approximately the same diameter. And the surface that we've got on that is reasonable. It's not perfect, but that's okay. Alright, now we're going to tape this up so that we can invert it and start working on the other side. Well, it turns out I hadn't done as bad as I thought I had. So I've actually got a fair amount of waste on this end, and I was able to move it out in the chuck, clamp it pretty securely. I'm going to check that just to make sure. And still get it relatively well centered. So we're going to go ahead and try to do most of the turning in this configuration. So I've got the live center moved up, that flat end is just pushing against the cartridge. And I'll try to do most of the shaping like this. And that'll allow me to maintain this in the chuck without damaging the cartridge in any way. So we're going to go on, continue with the scraper, and ultimately move to a spindle gouge to work on the curve at the top here. We will, in the end, have to take it out and turn it around to finish it, but we can do a lot of the work this way. I'm just going to mark the end point that I've got here. All right, let's start to form that end now. So we've just sort of given that a bit of a waste there and started to form the end here. So I'm going to actually take this off, saw through the end here just to make things easier, flip it around, and I'll bring you back as we're finishing the shaping. Alright, well this is far from perfect, but we do have it taped up and held in the chuck now. So let's see how this works. You can see it's actually moving around quite a bit. ugly. But see if I can move this back a bit more. On the edge of that, no, that'll sand out okay. Alright, so now I'm going to try to do just one very smooth scraping run across the entire length, just to sort of minimize the amount of sanding we have to do. Alright, it's an embarrassing bit of turning, but it's done, and sanding will take care of much of the problems. So I'll get the sandpaper while the furnace runs. Okay, so here we go with the sanding. We're going to work our way through grits. I'm starting off with relatively coarse 80 grit just to sort of knock ridges and things like that off. And then we'll go through it's 220, 320, 400, and 600. And there we go, that's fairly smooth. I'm going to just make sure there's no trouble spots here. I'm going to work that end a little bit more. I'm doing a lot more sanding than I would normally like to do, and it's because the turning went very poorly after I turned the piece around and was not able to chuck it all the way back and have it well centered and everything. So I'm paying the price for that, but that's okay. We will be able to get this to a point we like. So I will stop here and bring you back for the application. So we are ready now to apply the finish. The finish is going to be one of my favorite finishes, which is just pure tung oil. I've got some on a cloth here, and I will basically just spin it on. I like to apply a nice liberal coat at first. Make sure that I'm really saturating into the wood. Just give that a few seconds. Now, if this was not a turning, if this was a piece of furniture or something like that, you'd let this sit for hours, sometimes overnight. Knock it back with some steel wool and apply another coat, and you keep doing that to build coats. We're not relying on this for the gloss because we're going to be buffing this and putting a carnauba wax on it. But what we are relying on this for is to accentuate the grain, and it'll do that pretty much instantly. So there's no need to go through multiple coats and so on. So I'm now going to use a clean part of the towel just to take it off. Do a bit of buffing as well. But one thing that I will never do is I will never use a cloth around a lathe. It's very dangerous. So this is a paper towel. Paper towels, tissue, things like that are fine, but anything that's cloth can get caught up in that and just tear a finger off, and it's highly dangerous. So that's one safety tip. That, and I am wearing a face shield, so always do those things. Alright, let's see what we got. Well, there we go. That's very nice. Yeah, quite happy with that. So what we'll do now is we'll take it off the lathe. I'll take you back to the overhead shot, and we can look at it closely and talk about the next step, which is going to be the buffing.
All right, so we've this is the point we're at now. We've put the tongue oil on. You can see that grain has popped nicely, but it is still a very matte finish. There's no real gloss to it, and that's expected from just the single coat, but it does really accentuate the grain. Okay, so now we'll take this tape off. This is black electrical tape. It's pretty tough stuff for something like this. Works well. It also leaves fairly little residue, so that's a nice thing about it. And there we go. There's a little bit of a line there, which is probably some sticky. Yeah, it is. We can get that off. I'm just going to take a little bit of alcohol on a paper towel and clean off the shell casing. And there you can see that's come off nicely. So there we have it. We are rapidly approaching a finished product. Now, you could actually leave it like this. You could just use tongue oil. You could use a shellac or something like that. You know, it's really up to your own interest. I have the equipment to polish, buff and wax it, and that's what I'm used to doing, so that's what I'm going to do with this. So to do that, we're going to buff it at 2 grits. The first one is called Tripoli, and the second one is called White Diamond, and those are just 2 different polishing compounds that go on to the buffs and allow us to polish up both the wood and to some extent the metal. I don't like to polish metal if I can avoid it, because it discolors the buffs, but in this case it's a little dull and it'll benefit from a bit of polish. And then after that we will use a third wheel to apply some carnauba. So to do that I need to set I need to clean the lathe, because I actually buff on the lathe. And I'll show you that setup, which I've been wanting to do for a while, and I finally hope that I've got enough light over there that you can see what I'm doing. I'm not going to go into great detail about the buffing process in this video, but this can kind of be a precursor. If the video looks good, I'm hoping to do a video on pipe buffing sometime in the not too distant future. So let me go get that set up, and I'll bring you back over at the lathe once the buffing station is ready. Okay, we are ready to buff, and I just want to talk a bit about the tools that I'm going to be using. So we've got 3 buffs on here. This is the Tripoli compound, the White Diamond, and the carnauba wax. Most important, I've got safety glasses. This will throw a lot of stuff up at you, including compound, and it's really important to have safety glasses on, or else you'll get that in your eye. And we've got the 3 compounds here. So this is the Tripoli, the White Diamond, and the carnauba wax. So one more thing, I have back over here behind the camera a simple microfiber cloth, and that will stay behind the camera because, as I said earlier, I don't ever want to have those sorts of things around the lathe. It's quite dangerous. But I do use that between each step to clean off the compound and to make sure that there's no compound remaining on this before we move on to the next stage. So as I go through this, I will keep this running, and I will step back behind the camera, wipe it off with the micromesh pad, the microfiber cloth, and then I'll come back and go to the next stage. So the first thing you're going to see me do is charge each of the wheels, and I'll charge them as much as I charge them when I'm doing a pipe, and then I'll begin the process of buffing the tamper. Charge the wheels at top speed.
for the first two steps, I like to keep it around somewhere between 16 and 1700 RPMs. It's 1665 now. And here we go. Just slowly working my way around, trying to make sure that I hit every surface. Okay, now you're going to start to see some color coming off the metal. It's not so bad, it's darkening a bit. Alright, I'm going to wipe that off. And onto the white diamond, same process. So if you're doing this right, whether you're buffing a pipe or a tamper or any other piece of wood, you should start to see the wood becoming glossy. I am sharp there. I am, but there's no way you can see what I'm trying to show you here. Maybe you can see it up against this. So there should be a gloss on the wood at this point. It's been polished, but of course it has not yet been waxed. So I'm just doing a little bit more wiping off because I want to make sure that it's really clean before I put the wax on, since the wax is going to essentially seal the surface. Alright, so now for waxing, I dropped this down to about 900. If you put it on faster than that, it starts to sort of build up in a clumpy fashion, and it just doesn't look very good. 900 seems to be the sweet spot. I'm just going to move the banjo down to the other end. You'll notice I took the tool rest off just to keep from banging my knuckles on it. And here we go. And that looks done to me, so let's take it back over to the bench and take a look at it.
Alright, so here we are with the finished tamper, and you can see we did not exactly match the profile that we had sketched out, but that's okay. That was just sort of a starting guide, and we kind of let the wood tell us where to go. And you can see it looks quite nice. Got some nice grain in this piece of cocobolo. Fits nicely in the hand. I like that little waist because the thumb can sit in there nicely, and it's got enough weight to it that tamping is going to be a pleasure. So it's really nice to be able to add this to my collection, especially since the shell casing came from a friend, and I know that he has a companion piece that's very similar. So when we tamp with our respective tampers, we can think of one another and enjoy the smoke. So I hope you enjoyed that. I know it's a bit of a departure from what I normally do in these shop videos, but I thought it was something that would be of interest to some of y'all. There's of course 100 different ways you could do this. You could just carve it, just use carving tools and sandpaper and files and do it that way. You don't need to have a lathe, and you can make some very nice tampers that way. I even have made them, forget about the shell casing, and this is one that I never finished. It's very rough turned, but I would turn them just out of wood, and they last surprisingly long. The end gets darkened, of course, from the heat, but it doesn't burn up or anything. And yeah, these actually work just fine. So making a tamper is a nice project that really anyone with a few hand tools can accomplish and have a good time with it. The finishes don't have to be anything like what I did here. As I mentioned earlier, just multiple coats of tung oil would be really nice. Even a can of spray shellac would do the job for you. It's a tool in the end. And the nice thing about it is that it's a tool that you make yourself and you can be proud of. And it just means something special when you're sitting down to have that smoke, to have something in your hand that you know that you made that wouldn't have existed without you. So anyway, I hope you've all enjoyed that. And until the next time, I will look forward to talking to you all again very soon. Goodbye now.